Are you lost driving online? Looking for a new destination for audible inspiration? Pull over here. This is Exit 18.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Chris Short, the Executive Director of the New Paltz Regional Chamber of Commerce here on the Exit 18 podcast. And today's guest is a good friend of mine from years ago. I met him. And this is Skip Weisman from yourchampionshipcompany.com. Skip, how you doing?
Doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances here in the self-isolation chamber.
Yes. We're definitely, I think a lot of people are now using platforms like this, Zoom, to kind of communicate with their teams. And this was a conversation you and I had just recently, and I thought I'd love to bring you on and talk about a project that we're working on that we're going to launch next week. And it's really interesting because when I first met you was probably close to 15 plus years ago. You were the CEO of the Hudson Valley Renegades. Yep. And your whole career has kind of been based around teams and teamwork.
Yep. So
we've stayed in contact over the years, and I've been watching all the things that you're doing. And right now, I figured this would be a perfect time to chat with you about, you know, what it means to make your remote workplace work. This is the project that we're working on. So I'm interested to get some of your ideas on, you know, what you're seeing and how this new landscape is actually starting to turn into, you know, a remote workplaw.
It's been an interesting transition the last few weeks, hasn't it? And you know, actually, I think you and I met actually more than 20 years ago. I know it's kind of frightening to think that. I left the Renegades in my baseball career in 2001, so this is my 19th year out of the game, and I was in baseball for 20 years. So yeah, it was the late 90s when we first met, and I've been doing this work with work environments, creating what I call championship companies, championship work environments, but those are pretty much in the brick and mortar, you know, on-site world. And I've seen obviously just a drastic change in just the last 6 or 8 weeks and how companies that forever resisted remote or flexible work environments or whatever you want to call it, just didn't think that was possible for their company. And then all of a sudden come, you know, mid-March or whatever, and the business is shut down. And now we're saying, well, we got to get stuff done, but we can't come to the office. And what are we going to do? And now organizations that never thought they could work remotely are now figuring out how to do it. As you know, in the software world, in the high-tech world, it's not unusual to have a lot of remote workers. But in your regular, everyday New Paltz area regional businesses, it's unique and it's new, and people are having to figure it out.
Yeah, I've been working in technology for probably the last 15 years, and remote work for me has become the norm over the last 8 to 10. Working overseas, you know, working across the country, a lot of different things where you have to check in with teams and you know, work with the resources that you have at a distance. So I know a lot of employers are struggling right now to figure out, you know, how to make remote workers feel comfortable, understands, you know, objectives and going about that. And I know you've done a lot of research in what that looks like for, you know, the common business that is trying to wrangle this idea of remote work. So you have any insights on that?
It's been really interesting to look into it. I've done a lot of research the last few weeks just because it's been interesting for me. And actually what triggered my thought on this was really a personal experience because my wife works for our local county government in Dutchess County. And you know, that's typically a work environment that people were expected to be at their desk 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And if you go to lunch or you take a break, you got to, you know, document that, and that comes off your timesheet and all that stuff. And you know, working from home was just never an option. And so all of a sudden, you know, 4 weeks ago, you know, she's coming in bringing a laptop or a computer from the office home, and they brought in a second screen, so you have the dual screen thing, and she goes into our guest bedroom and starts setting up her own little office with a card table and everything. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess they're going to let you do this and figure it out. She has a team of 4 other people that she leads and manages that are, you know, doing it too. And so I'm starting to think about this as, man, so county government employees who never could, you know, imagine, you know, being a remote, flexible workplace now are having to figure it out. And I'm saying, boy, there must be a lot of other businesses that have to do this too. And then I have a client down in Yonkers that's a manufacturing company, a machine shop. They got 25 or so employees. 17 are machinists in the shop production floor, and they have 6 or 7 in the office. And they're trying to figure this out. Well, obviously the machinists in the manufacturing environment have to be on site to do their thing, and they're doing social distancing and they're doing shifts. So they only have a half a dozen people, on the shop instead of 16 or 17. But everybody in the office is working remotely. The CEO, who's pretty technical savvy, just took the first week of this and went around to people's homes of his employees and set them up at home. And they're doing it now for the last month or so. And so it's happening, and it's come upon us almost overnight. We got to figure this thing out. And so it's new for us, but it's not new for many other parts of the world or different industries. So like you said, in your world, it was pretty commonplace. I was looking at what the rest of the world is like. I know, Americans have different feelings about other countries and what they're doing, and whether what other countries do works in America. But this is not anything new for Europeans. There's a much more flexible work environment over there. And so I just looked at the 2017 study. Denmark, 23% of their work environment works remotely from home at least several times per month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Netherlands is 21%. Sweden is 18%. United States Department of Bureau of Labor Statistics for 2019 said just 7% of Americans work from home a couple of times per month, which that's not, a couple of times per month or several times per month, not a lot, and so you would think there'd be more people doing that. I was really surprised by those statistics, even 7% being low for the state.
Yeah, 7%. That's surprising for me. Maybe because of the world of freelance and marketing and software, that it's become sort of the norm to do things like that. So 7%, that's a lot lower than I would have considered. And right now, it's got to be close to almost 50% maybe right now, with everybody trying to figure it out. There's a lot of jobs, obviously, that don't translate into the virtual space.
Right.
But a way to communicate with your team members, even if you are in a business that doesn't have that, this is something that I think is going to be something that really takes front and center for a lot of companies moving forward. I know that when we're looking at it through the lens of productivity, I used to have a lot of bosses through my career, last 20 years, where a lot of old school thought was productivity is tied to motion. So I know we spoke a little bit earlier about you have to be sitting in this seat for me to feel that you are providing value to the company, because I see you there doing something. And now that has been totally transformed in the last few weeks of what we're actually looking at. So do you have any tips or what's some of the concepts behind the idea of maintaining productivity? Are there any pitfalls? Are there things that really help drive that home, so that way if somebody is uncomfortable with that transition, that they might be able to feel a little bit better?
Yeah, there's obviously there's different type of people, different personalities you have to worry about, but the main thing is really, in my world and in my mindset and the way I've done this, and I've studied workplace communication for the last 20 years since I've left baseball, and that's what I do now is I work with business leaders to help them create work environments where people communicate collaboratively and positively and support each other, and they build a high trust, high respect work environment. If you've been doing that to this point, the remote thing's not a big deal. You're used to having those conversations around what's getting done or what you need to get done, and there's conversations around these are the outcomes or objectives we want to achieve, right? If you're in an example like you're saying, productivity is somewhat gauged by whether you're sitting at a desk or not in an office setting, or I see you walking around, so you must be busy, and that's how I gauge your value. Yeah, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. I don't know what you're doing. You're playing with your dog. You're watching Netflix all day. That scares me because I'm paying you to sit at home and twiddle your thumbs. Or, so if you've had those conversations with people while they're on site in your office about objectives and outcomes and results you need to achieve for your job, that's an easy transition to the remote workplace. If you haven't been doing that, you've been relying on FaceTime and seeing people sitting at their desk, believing in the myth that, FaceTime is productivity, then you're going to struggle and you're going to be really stressed over it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's really where the shift has to come in, and leaders and managers are going to really have to look at how they're doing their job. Have I really communicated as a leader with my people that's been most effective? And do I have a high trust, high respect relationship with them where I can let them go and I know stuff's going to get done? And that's really what you do. You have to define what's the job? What do you need to do? Whether you're in the office, on site at your desk, or whether you're at home at your home office that you've just created, what do you have to get done? Focus on that. Forget about the rest, because too long we have equated FaceTime with productivity or being on site, or as you said, motion is productivity. No, people, just because you're walking around shuffling papers and moving stuff from one desk to another or one office to another, or you're having conversations, doesn't mean you're getting anything done.
Yeah.
How are we measuring productivity? And I think for far too long, we've really just accepted and expected that if somebody's on site, they're productive, and somebody who's not on site's not productive. And that's just a myth.
Are there any pitfalls that you've seen in your research, or has anything come up recently that seems to be the one thing that carries people into that, I guess, danger zone of remote work? Is there like a number one theme or pitfall that really kind of makes it difficult for somebody to transition?
The biggest thing that I keep seeing about and hearing about is the number one pitfall is just that human interaction. And I feel it too. I've been working on my own in my own home office since 2007. When I left baseball, I actually had an office outside of our home because I didn't have a room conducive to setting up an office. And then we moved to home and I set up an office there. So for the last 13 years or so, I've been working from home myself. And, I really like organizations like yours and chambers and other networking events to get out of the house and have some human interaction, right? And so I think we are social creatures and we need that. And if you're not used to working alone, you get, a little cabin feverish, and you get a little crazy sometimes because you're just here by yourself. And so that's the big thing that people really struggle with, that human interaction. And this is great. The Zoom and other web conferencing stuff is great for the video conference. And it's maybe the second or third best way to engage with another human being. There's nothing that replaces being together in the same room together, right? And so that's the biggest challenge people have in an adjustment. And then, the distractions that come from home. And again,
it's interesting you brought up the word, you said distractions. I know for a lot of us, we talked about right before we went live here about the idea of all of us have been in that situation where we've either gone in early to work because, you had to get something done, or stayed late going in on a weekend or something like that. I think a lot of people don't realize that we've been kind of under the gun when it comes to productivity because of distractions. Tell a little bit about that. We were talking earlier about the idea that, all of us have fallen into that scenario where we've had, we feel the need to go in early.
Yeah.
That way we can be more productive.
Yeah. And I just ask people watching this to think about, was there ever a time where you realized, I couldn't get anything done yesterday. I've got to go in early. Right. And so you get up crazy and most people come to your office at 8 or 8:30, so you make sure you get there by 6:30 or 7. So you get an hour and a half, 2 hours of private time. Or have you ever, left with a stack of paperwork or whatever you needed to get done on a Friday afternoon, couldn't get done because there's other priorities, and you said, I'm going to go in Saturday for a couple hours and knock some things out, right? And most people in those environments are so productive. My wife said to me yesterday, she went into her office for social distancing concerns at 5:30 yesterday and worked for 3 hours in her office before everybody, some people came in at 8:30 and then she left. And she came home and said, I got a full day's work done in 3 hours. What I typically get done in a regular office setting, it might take me all day, I got done in 3 hours. Now, so then she comes home and the expectation is she's going to still put another 4.5 hours in because it's all based on time, but not productivity. But if she got a full day's work done under normal circumstances that she would get done in her office, in my estimation, she's done for the day. Because it's about productivity and getting stuff done. Now, she's a unique government employee who was very conscientious, and she had some meetings, and she still worked her full day, but she was really amazed at herself as to how much more important that was to have that private time and get stuff done and be productive. And so we've done that. So if you can transition that and you think about what a home office could do for you from that perspective. Now you have other distractions. You have home distractions. You might have, especially now with kids home from school, that colleagues of mine who are experiencing that for the first time, that's a huge thing. I was on a call yesterday, and kids kept coming into the room. No, I'm on a meeting. I'm on a meeting.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
And so those things are distractions, and so you have to manage those as best you can. But at best, I think it's an equal sum game, because think about the distractions you have in a regular office setting. You have people doing drive-bys, walking by your office, just dropping in, asking for things, phone calls coming in that you have to take that, because of this dopamine thing, the phone rings, you just jump and you pick it up, or emails or whatever in your office. Whatever, and you get emails at home, obviously, so that may not matter, but just the office environment with more people around just causes more distractions. And it's too easy to come up and, interrupt you because you're right around the corner. And so I'll just get up and go there. Now, so there's all those distractions in the office that we really take for granted on one end, but we're also frustrated and stressed out by them on the other hand, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can set up an environment at home, you're going to have other distractions to deal with, and you just have to manage those. But I can guarantee it's easier to shut down at home for a couple hours and get stuff done than it is an office setting where there's other people around.
There's definitely a new way of, I know the first, when things, transitioning online for a lot of, our committees, a lot of our board members, a lot of different businesses that I'm working with on a daily and weekly basis. The hard thing was trying to turn it off, because I think the idea here is when we're home and we are working from home, the work hour, the 9 to 5 started getting blurry. And I know a lot of people are talking about burnout because if they have a home office and, I keep my computer up all day long and emails are coming in, I started catching myself answering emails and doing a lot of work at like 9, 10 o'clock at night out of obligation, because I felt like this is something that, obviously while we were trying to manage everything, as it was coming, that was one thing. But then that burnout started to, really take its toll. So I know it's key for, even though you are working at home, is to kind of structure your day. I've heard you say that a couple times, about having a plan. So that way, the 9 to 5 is still there, but then you still have to maintain some personal time. So that way, if you are working at home, that line doesn't get blurry. Do you have, in a hybrid situation like that, where we are working at home and we have this always on scenario, how does that kind of play into the bigger picture here moving forward?
Yeah, it's all about setting boundaries for ourselves and others on what that expectation is. And I'm as guilty as anybody working. The laptop is always on my lap, right? Ironically, for me personally, I've actually been better at this time shutting down. I don't know, maybe that's because my wife is now in the home with me, and we can take a break for lunch together or whatever. I've been shutting down every day at somewhere between 4 and 5 p.m. and we're going out for a walk. We call it a power walk, and we're trying to get some exercise in. And so that's never happened before in my work environment. But the
Yeah.
one thing I think we should do is obviously set boundaries, but be okay with working a little bit, because I have no problem with people working 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night if they're taking time earlier in the day
For themselves.
right? So instead of working that strict 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5, why not work 8 till noon, take a 2-hour lunch and relax and watch something on Netflix or whatever. And then you go back to work from 3 to 5 and have dinner, and then you work from 7 to 9 or something like that. Unless you are tied to that 9 to 5 work day for servicing people, you can do that work on a more flexible basis. And I think that, to me, even makes people more productive, because you're not just tied to that desk for 8 hours. You get refreshed. I'm much fresher and much more creative after my power walk in the afternoon.
100%.
And it makes me feel much more energized or re-energized, because we go do the power walk, then we have dinner, and then I'll go back and do some stuff from 7 to 9, and I just feel much more refreshed and getting more creative and that stuff. So everybody has to figure out their own way, but I really think with that, more flexibility is going to create greater productivity. Maybe that's a new phrase. More flexibility leads to greater productivity.
Absolutely. I know when I get writer's block, or I get, I'm looking in a creative slump, I know, I forget where I heard it, and I'm sure it's been said 100 times, is if you change your location, you change your mindset, right? So if I get into this kind of slump, if I'm just stuck staring at a keyboard, and if it is writer's block for, a project I'm working on, or a blog post, or whatever it is, some communication, I have the ability to get up, walk around, go out, get some fresh air. That change of scenery redirects, the pathways in your brain to come back to something and look at it from a different angle, right? So by doing that, you have the ability to kind of shift gears. So I think something we spoke about earlier that was a great line that you shared with me was that leaders have to lead differently. And I think moving into the next 6 months to a year to 2 years of business, this has been a wake-up call for a lot of people in positions of authority or leadership that haven't been tested under these circumstances. Where do you see, when you talk about leaders need to lead differently, where do you see that going in, we'll say, the next 6 months to a year?
Well, I think maybe I'm biased here, but I think it's going to be good for the world and good for leadership and good for people that work under leaders, because they're going to have to be better leaders. And leadership is about communication. And so this is a time where hopefully I can thrive, and I can help business leaders get better communication, because that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. 2 years ago, I wrote a book called Overcoming the 7 Deadliest Communication Sins, 7 biggest mistakes we're making in communicating with people, especially in a work environment that kills productivity. And so leaders just have to become better communicators, more transparent in their communication more than ever. One of the things that I think has opened up in this environment has been companies being more transparent with their communication, because they have to be. This is the status of our company. We have to put you on furlough or lay you off just for the time being, because we don't have any cash to pay anybody, right? And so I think company leaders are being more transparent in their conversations. The challenge is, if we haven't been transparent, people may not trust even what they're being told in this environment. So we have to build that trust, high levels of trust through more transparent communication. And that's sort of what my business is. It's all about workplace transparency and communication. That's what they're going to have to start doing. And that's where real great leaders step up and lead from. I mean, I was listening to a couple of interviews with Stanley McChrystal, the former Army general, who's now got his own consulting and leadership coaching company, but he was interviewed on NPR about how to lead in a crisis. And his main thing was, you've got to be transparent. Tell people what you know. You have to be 2 things. You have to be vulnerable and transparent. Be vulnerable and humble, and tell people if you don't know something. This is such a new environment. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's going on. This is what I do know, and I'm willing to share everything I do know, so that you're in the know, and you can be empowered to make your own decisions and your own choices. Let's have a conversation about it. And I think to this point, a lot of leaders have really struggled with those type of conversations and that type of communication. And I think the good thing that's going to come out of this environment is much more of that, which I think is good for the world.
Yeah, I agree. There's a great line on one of the calls that I was on the other day. It was a brainstorming session. One thing that I try and do and I promote as much as I can is the mentorship piece through, just regular business, right? Having a mentor you can look up to, and for you to actually have a protege, someone that you could mentor and share that. That falls into the transparency thing. That's a big, huge part of my career, is to tap into my resources. And those resources are people and experience, and saying, hey, this isn't it. So we had a Zoom call like this the other day, and we were kind of bouncing around, and exactly that. There was a lot of vulnerability there. People are willing to kind of share that, hey, I'm struggling with this or struggling with that. And this kind of, we were crowdsourcing ideas, and a great comment came out of it and said, it's in situations like this, legends are born. Right. So when we're in a situation where things are, at its darkest, and we have an opportunity to step up and innovate and step forward, and run towards, adversity, instead of shrieking and, pulling back, that this is the perfect time to, create that legend. Like, what's your legend? How are you going to step out of the crowd and be that, force for good moving forward? So that was something that really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, all that stuff comes out of necessity. We've got to do something. And one of my colleagues, coaching colleagues, on a call the other day said, I think we have to assume that everybody is not okay. We're all struggling with something in some way, at some deep level, and we have to really be compassionate and empathetic about that, because you're struggling, I'm struggling, all in our own different ways at different various levels, but there's few people who are okay in this environment right now. And I think that's a good thing, because I think it levels the playing field.
It does. And I think a lot of, in a world of, everybody, looking through an Instagram filter, that filter's been removed, and now we're, in this vulnerable space. So I think what's really great is we spoke last week about putting something together, and you've agreed to put together a free webinar for the chamber. We're calling it Make Your Remote Place Work. And we're going to actually be holding it on Wednesday, the 29th at 1 p.m. There's going to be an event on our Facebook page. Can you give us a little sneak peek of what that's going to be, what you're going to go over? Because I think this is a perfect opportunity for people in business to kind of wrap their heads around how this is going to affect them. And, you have some tools and tactics you're going to share in that free webinar to kind of let people know, or a web class actually, on what they're actually, what they could use immediately, practically right out of the gate to change their workforce. You got any sneak peeks for us?
Yeah, well, we're going to go a little bit more into the research. There's been, over the last 10 years, or probably 7 years, I guess, there's been some research with people who have actually tried this remote work environment. So we're going to dig deep into some of the statistics there, and show that productivity from a remote work environment can actually improve your company. I think that's important to really understand, because you'll start trusting it better once you start seeing what other people have done and been successful with it. I've done a lot of reading in the recent weeks about companies who have been actually doing this as part of their business model. And yes, it's the high tech world and everything, but that's where it started, and I think we can learn a lot from that. Matt Mullenweg with WordPress, people may be familiar with the WordPress platform for their websites, has a company called Automatic that is the parent company for WordPress, and he has 1,200 employees working in what he calls a distributed work environment. He doesn't call it remote; he calls it distributed. Same thing, but he likes the word distributed because remote, just sounds like you're off on the on a beach somewhere and you can't be found. But it's distributed. It's just 1,200 employees working in different locations, and they've been doing it for 10, 12 years now. Jason Fried with Basecamp, you may be familiar with Basecamp, also has a similar thing, and they've both written books about it. So I'm going to go into some of their strategies that they've learned over time. And then from all that, I've created a thing called the ROI, how to get an ROI, how to apply ROI to get an ROI out of your remote workforce. And the R is basically talking about results. talking about outcomes and integration. Because as we talked about, the big thing is when you have a remote team, how do you keep people integrated and feeling like they're still part of a team and not in some remote, work environment off by themselves? And so that integration, as I said earlier, what I've read in both Matt and Jason's publications is that's really big for people, that making sure you're really still feeling as a part of an integrated company and an integrated team. And so we're going to talk about the ROI method I'm creating for remote work environments, which is basically the acronym is results, outcomes, and integration. So
awesome. Cool. Well, I think that's going to be a great class. If anybody is interested, what's the best way to get in touch with you outside of this? We're going to have the everything set up on Facebook. They could log in, register for the class, but how can they get in touch with you if they have other questions?
Well, you can go to my website at yourchampionshipcompany.com and check out the resources I have there, some videos and some blog articles and some other resources. I have a communication cost calculator. You can see how bad communication is in your work environment. It might be costing you some money and stuff. So a lot of resources on the website. Phone number 914-456-6387. Feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to do some laser coaching with people if they want to wrap their head around this thing. But I would say we'll probably be more available to do that once they have a sense of what we talk about on the web class on Wednesday, because we'll go deeper into the research. We'll see what Matt and Jason are doing at their companies, and we'll talk about the ROI method for getting an ROI from your work environment.
That's awesome. Cool. Skip, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and sharing some of your insights on, remote work and making it work. This is awesome. So everybody stay tuned. This is the first of many Exit 18 podcasts where we actually talk to individuals and they share their expertise on what's going on. And we hope to see you in class. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chris. Bye, everybody.